Welcome to a new episode of the Full Scope Cybercast, Safeguarding the Digital Frontier. I'm your host, Matt Van Pelt, and with me today is Brian Amadeo with Full Scope IT's business development team. How are you today, Brian?
I'm doing great, Matthew. How are you doing?
Doing terrific. And also with me today, new to the podcast, is Tracy Perry from the Full Scope IT account management team. Welcome, Tracy.
Thank you, Matt. Glad to be here.
All right. Well, fantastic. Let's get into today's episode, which is choosing the right MSP for your company. And I guess we'll start that discussion by breaking down this week's buzzword.
Breaking down the buzzword.
MSP, Managed Services Provider. Brian, could you explain to us what an MSP is?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of ways to kind of look at what this is, but probably the easiest way for people to understand it is that it's an external or fractional IT department for your company. So, if you're not in the position where you've got these people in-house, this is a better way to do it, and another way to actually save money in most cases. So we are a third party or fractional IT team for your company.
And we manage all your IT support and services so you can focus on what's most important to you, your business.
Awesome. So tell me what the difference is between having an MSP and having an internal IT person at your company.
A couple ways I think to look at this too. So, as Tracy said, there's a lot of things to manage in people and headcount. And so this is a really good way to not have to think about those things. And so for a lot of companies that are in this, I'll say 5 to 200 employee range, not having to have the headcount, it can be a cost savings from that standpoint, but not having to manage people. And then a lot of times people or companies will get into this, say they're 25 people in their organization, and they'll start to think, okay, we should probably hire somebody. And that one person is just not going to do the job of everybody that we're going to be able to provide. So, I mean, you basically get an IT director, a network administrator, a dedicated help desk team, all for, doing what that one person would try to do. So it's a really big advantage in that case. So they can spend a little less time thinking about what's happening, a little more time, looking at the direction that the company needs to go, and just letting the pros do the really hard work. So I think that's the biggest difference. I'm sure you probably have a couple things you'd add to that, Tracy.
Yeah, you pretty much have access to just about all of us versus one guy. But of course, if you are in a bigger corporation and you do have one internal IT person and you want to keep him on board, we do co-managed IT as well. So we'll work individually with that one person that you want to keep on your staff. So we can go either way with that. And we do have several clients today who we do that scenario with.
And even to add on top of that too, as an example, Tracy's role, right, as our account manager internally. So that's a whole nother body and another brain that helps you kind of work through some of the things. So one of the things that she'll do is give some ideas and things to look ahead that organizations aren't necessarily thinking of. So we're able to get them to start to make decisions on things in that 1, 2, 3 year range. Most people are looking right in front of them, right? Just what's my problem today? What do I have to deal with right now? So we're able to slow that down a little bit and take off some of that burden as well.
Yeah, we're very proactive with our recommendations. So, we do talk with the IT point of contact at our clients and really have them forward thinking, like, how can we help you, not just now, but moving forward, being proactive in that sense, if you will.
Great. So I guess along those lines, so what for either scenario, what part is the client responsible for, and what is the MSP responsible for when it comes to the internal workings, I guess, for lack of a better term?
Just want to open a can of worms? Is that what you're trying to do?
Absolutely.
um,
I can run a little bit here, Brian. When we're onboarding customers, they provide us with a lot of information, lists, if you will, of their employees, an IT point of contact. And then when we go to actually onboard on site, our techs begin to install our tools, label computers, document the processes, basically get our arms around everything. And then once they do become a customer, um, after the 8 weekly onboarding meetings, as we are onboarding them, they meet with me and also an engineer, just so we can stay in lockstep along the way, and make sure all their questions are being answered. I provide them with tidbits every week on ticket tidbits, things that just to make sure we got our arms around everything and they know what's going on as we progress. So we give them progress reports as well. And then once they do become a customer, we are obviously doing the quarterly reviews with them, making sure they understand the expected response times, and go over their entire infrastructure, all the reports and whatnot. I believe we run like 7 to 8,000 processes in the background when they become a customer that they don't even realize are happening. It's creating 7 to 8,000 tickets, if you will, that we see internally, but they never even see. So just kind of educate them. In the IT world, a lot of our customers or just people in general don't know what they don't know. So myself and the engineer will spend the first couple QBRs with them, just really educating them and letting them understand what we do, and letting them tell us what's coming down the pipe so we're prepared for their future in technology and can grow with them as hopefully they grow as well. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes and a lot of education during this whole onboarding and the first couple QBRs or quarterly business reviews we have with them.
Awesome.
there's also another way to draw the line in the sand, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think one of the best ways it's explained to me was, is it the technology or is it using the technology? To give you an example of that, let's take an accounting software. So we're going to manage the software. We're going to keep it up to date, keep it secure, keep the infrastructure secure. But let's just say they have a new employee come on board and maybe they have to add a new user. That's an example of the organization's responsibility. So, or say password management. It's probably the most common ticket, right? So if they forgot their password, that's will help them do the reset, but it's up to them to decide on that password. We might give them some good examples of what a strong password should be, but so using the product versus the product being available and ready and secure are the two differences, if that makes sense at all. So it's, but that's probably the best way I've understood is it the technology itself or using
Right.
that
Okay.
part of the technology?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I know, Tracy, you talked about education. I want to kind of talk about another part of that, and this comes up in lots of our previous episodes. Is training. User training, as far as avoiding pitfalls and all the scams we've talked about and all that. What does a managed service? What's the managed service providers? What do they do as far as to help train users for any of the clients?
Well, one of the things, and I might be a little biased with our engineers, but I think our guys are awesome about putting things in non-geek speak so people can understand it. That's that's one of our strongest assets here, I think, at Full Scope IT. Our engineers are great. They've helped me tremendously learn a lot since I've gone into the account management role and understanding all the different tools we utilize as well. But again, I've heard that from clients all the time. Your engineers are great at putting it in terms we can understand, and things of that nature. So, I talk to them about the various ticket types that they input. Educate them on some tidbits as they're inputting tickets that can help down the line, that will help them get responses even quicker than they do already. So a lot of education on just processes and workflows and things of that nature. And once they understand that, um, that helps them into how they report their tickets and do things of that nature. So also, we spend a great deal of time talking about their various their network infrastructure, if you will, in and of itself. So, for instance, we have a new graphic that we use. It kind of depicts their cybersecurity area and things that are enabled for them, things that they could possibly enable going forward if they're interested. But we just educate them on all sorts of those things. One example is MFA. Sometimes that's like pulling teeth with some of our clients just to get them to enable it. They're like, what is MFA? Multi-factor authentication. When you go into your banking account, you got to put that code into your cell phone or your laptop to get to your account. Oh, okay. And then sometimes they don't understand the importance of doing that, and that it's an extra layer of security. And once you explain that to them, and how that stops a lot of the ransomware, then they get it. But it's just spending the extra time to explain all that to them, and providing that information for them. Again, in terms that they can understand non-geek speak. That's key.
And like on those types of topics, we're happy to help with framework and some of the, like a document that would help the rest of the employees in their organization. Maybe a quick how-to or a step-by-step, all the way from something as simple as, how do I enable or how do I use MFA within that specific organization, but even all the way to, say, DoD level compliance, right? So giving framework in general, that, and here's another dividing line here from your previous question, Matt. And so we can help with a lot of these templates and framework, but as an example, in some of that stuff, the organization has to be able to write the specifics for their, like, that's not something we could do, right? Because we don't know their organization. But we have the templates and the things ready to go to help them to get to at least get that part out of the way, and then they've just got to add the content that's specific to them. So a lot of stuff. So the education's a good part, even like with all the dark web and cybersecurity training and things that are required from a lot of the insurance stuff, like we talked about in our insurance episode. And we can get them there. We can give you the portal, but then it's up to them
To make sure.
to have their employees go and do those trainings. Right, that's where the accountability falls back on that organization. But we set up the portal, we give all the licensing, we provide all the tools, but they have to actually use them.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, we're very supportive with framework. I think is the best way to
Yep.
put that.
Excellent. So, what are some additional benefits for working with an MSP?
There's a lot of things actually. I mean, there's so many things that we're doing in the background. We're an entire team, right? We're an organization that's dedicated to this. We've got executive teams, people that are looking at what's the latest threats and what's the best defense against those, and what are the tools being used. What's the real focus currently as far as threats, and so, I mean, just knowing that you have an entire team that's always looking out for you, right, is a really big example of something like that. But Tracy, I know something you deal with and talk about a lot is when we start bringing people on and we take a look at, well, who's your internet provider, right? Who's your phone provider? What are all your software tools that you guys buy as an organization? And then we take that management on too, right? So now when you have a problem with some of those things, we're the ones calling.
Right.
Right. So we're getting involved in that. And so we become that extension. We truly call, oh, hello, this is XYZ company. We're the IT department. And it eliminates so much finger pointing. Someone doesn't have to know what's going on in the background. We're able to speak to the environment and get right to the solution without anybody saying, oh yeah, no, it must be on your end. Oh no, I can verify it's not on our end. And here's 3 reasons. And I can actually argue that because I have data to back up why our end is just fine.
Yep.
Uh,
A lot of
so
our
yeah, this was,
clients, yeah, sorry, Brian. A lot of our clients do have like lines of business, large apps that they're using, and a lot of times they might have issues with it. Oftentimes, we'll serve as a liaison between that line of business software vendor and the client, just to keep everybody on the same page, which is a good example of that. Plus, we have access to many other partnerships that they could be interested in. One being the cyber insurance, which that episode was previously, is just one of the many examples for those other partnerships that we can put them in touch with.
Awesome.
we bring in executive level decision making and critical thinking as far as that goes too. Right? So, so someone that an organization that wouldn't have like the CIO or the CTO or the CISO in their organization, they get the benefits that we're doing those things, and then we're advising for best practices to manage whatever that means. So it just could be, as an example, right? We switched for a password manager tool from one tool to another, and that was because there was industry changes. We're still talking to a lot of people, some new, people that are interested in our services that are still on that other platform because there's really nothing wrong with it. But it was a business decision that we made for various reasons. But as an example, we're taking that time and we're spending time talking about it and determining what's the best interest of our clients. And if this was our organization, what should we be doing? So we all changed, right? So then we extended that to our clients. So if you think about it from that standpoint, where you've got not just the boots on the ground, so to speak, between the help desk and the dedicated network admin and things of that nature, and even up to IT director, but now we're also bringing in the executive level decision making, and then having those conversations with our clients and letting them make the decisions, right? But us as an advisor in that situation and saying like, here's what we believe makes the most sense. Or even migrating, like there's a lot of changes to the infrastructure. And you have so many, like IT is such a big umbrella. And we see it when we've got organizations that have, say, an IT person, an internal person that we're working with. And that internal person comes from one portion of the industry, and the theories and the ideals are so different than what might apply to their business. Are they brilliant within kind of the structure and the education that they have? 100%. It just doesn't always apply. So sometimes we get people from, as an example, say from server world, where you're just dealing with huge server farms. And so redundancy is a really huge thing in that world. But if you've got an office with 50 people on it and just typical good internet, and you don't need 4 switches on the shelf in case one goes bad because the average lifespan's 8 years, like you just don't have to make the same decisions. And then the opposite happens, we get people that kind of aren't thinking about security, aren't thinking about infrastructure, aren't thinking about these things because they come from an even smaller scenario, or they were the IT guy as opposed to a managed service provider company, technology company. And so we can help manage, what is really the best scenario for your specific business. We do try to play within verticals. So a lot of managed service providers, to make this a little more generic, focus on a handful or 1 or 2 particular industries. So they get very, very good at that industry. And I don't know if any of you have ever gone to a mechanic when your car has a problem, and they might actually ask you a question, because they know how to work on 100 different cars, but you might know the anomalies of your model. And they actually want to know, well, wait, is there anything about your car that you should know? So we end up in that scenario too, where it's like, hey, you might be a brilliant IT person, but if you haven't worked with CPAs, you don't realize there's a couple of things that are extremely specific to their industry. And so that's another kind of difference between your IT guy, your internal single person, and then your managed service provider that knows that industry in and out. And that's what their focus is. And so they know those additional tricks or specific compliances, things along that line. So when if you think about it, you've got how could one person do all of that or think about all of those things in comparison to an entire team? And then if you think about the amount of engineers that we have that are all working on these things, and there's a whole nother set of brilliant minds that they're comparing. What are they seeing every day? What are they coming across? Right. So I know our engineers go back and they talk to the other engineers and go, hey, I'm dealing with this. Does anybody have, a better solution? Have we come across this 10 other times and I'm just the last one to the party today, or whatever. But point being is, how could you match that? Right. So there's so that's the other thing is people think, oh, I'll even if I hire those 4 people, and even if they're a little bit more expensive than hiring your organization, I feel like I'd rather have the control. I'd rather have the employees, which, I can't imagine we would want that. But you're still not going to be able to make the same decisions and have the same level of expertise as an IT firm that's their only thing, and then they've got 5 or 3 or 10 of each of those minds. So there's some huge advantages to just knowing that there's a lot of people. Now in the MSP world, we do see we're a reasonable size, but we do see some smaller managed service providers that it's 2 engineers, it's an owner operator. So there is a difference there where you graduate to an actual organization that is much bigger and can share those best practices amongst a bigger team. So there's even a lot of differences or levels within MSPs. So that's, if there's another education piece in here, I'd say it's, ask the question, how large is your organization? Are you multiple locations? Not that makes a difference, but, if we deal with, I'll go back to CPAs, they might have different practices on the East Coast versus the West Coast. And there might be some differences there. So if you have an organization that's growing, you might be beneficial to have an MSP that's considered national versus regional, versus even owner operator versus larger business or structured business.
And again, to piggyback on that, you're dealing with an MSP with an entire staff of techs who have to keep up with the latest certifications. That's a requirement for their job, but they love it. These techs live, and breathe this stuff. They love, live, and breathe it. And it excites me, being as an account manager, to see them get so excited when a new tool comes on board. We just had a training meeting the other day, and they were like so excited because they got this new tool. And I'm like, who does this? It's a job, and they love their jobs, and it's great. It's great to see. And you're given a staff like that you don't always get with one guy. With one guy, on your staff, taking care of your IT. How do you know he's keeping up with his certifications? How do you know he's keeping track of all your assets and devices out there? Unless he's bringing you all these reports on a regular basis, you probably don't. So
we actually had a couple of newer clients that were leaving an IT guy that had been with them for years. And it's one of those scenarios where when we did go over and help them understand their posture with that visual that Tracy was talking about earlier, I think one of the comments we had was, I'm surprised we've survived the day. Like, it was because the guy is probably a fantastic IT person, but he just doesn't have the capacity to do all the other things or to really have a really good understanding of the current industry as a whole. And I think a really good analogy for understanding the different roles and the levels of people is just think about the medical industry. A doctor, right? You have general doctors, you have doctors specific to surgery, you have doctors specific to parts of our bodies, right? Specialists and things of that nature. And IT is the same way. So you could have a general IT person, and then you can have those specialists, and then you have those those like ninjas. There's a select few that can really go in and slice something open and find the problem, fix it, put everything back together, and get out of there. And so a bigger organization or a larger MSP is going to have those assets versus that one brilliant mind. It just doesn't. They can be the smartest person in the world for this, but they just can't cover all the bases. It's just not possible. So that's the other downfall when people do try to hire somebody, because they're like, "Oh, I know this amazing guy." It's like, well, he's going to be good at something, but he's not going to be good at everything. And if he is, then you're still missing out on those specifics. So,
And if you're hiring him without him actually looking at your infrastructure, is going to be like, a doctor telling you you need surgery without x-rays. So just,
yeah,
be careful of
right.
sorts of things. Not always, the cheaper MSP isn't always the best. There's a reason they're able to offer cheaper prices. So
That's something we get a lot, right? Where people will call us and be like, "Yeah, how much are your services?" I don't know. I don't know what your problems are yet.
yeah.
Well, I just want just tell me how much it is. I don't know. I don't know anything about your organization. I don't know how many people you have and what type and what their needs are, and so that can be a little bit of friction initially. But I think you'd have to understand that if it's like Jay said, if you can't go to the doctor to say, "Give me the medication" or "Give me the procedure," well, for what? What do you need? And sometimes when we do dig in, their problems are way less than what they actually thought, and they don't need quite as much as they originally thought. And sometimes it's the other way too, where they're like, "Oh, we just need some basic things," and then you dive in, and you're like, "Oh no, you need much more than that." So you have to have this process of discovery and understanding.
I can remember, if you recall, I don't know if you remember this, Brian, but when I started account managing, or right prior to it, I had a company call me, and we were doing an audit IT on them, and they knew they had to do something. The audit was pretty bad. They knew they had to do something, and 2 weeks later, they called me back, and they had gotten a ransomware attack. And unfortunately, they went out of
Oh,
business. It was the ransomware attack was so high. I felt so bad, but
is that a call center?
it was no.
Does that ring a bell?
Uh,
Oh,
it might have been. It might have been. But yeah, I just felt so sorry for them, because when we told them, they knew they had to do something, but it was a matter of 2 weeks, and they got hit.
wow.
So you just really, really nowadays have to be careful of those things out there, and how easy it is, for these hackers to get in.
And I was having that conversation a little bit. It spurred it from the insurance call that we had, or that episode. Everybody believes like, oh, if the ransom's 50,000 and I have insurance for that, or I have that in the bank, and then yeah, but there's all these other things that cost money to remediate the problem, including the perception of your business at that point. But yeah, it's always more expensive than the actual ransom, and that's the other thing. So yeah, most just can't afford. So having as many things in place, that's where an MSP is also a really big benefit. So if you just have that one person internally, or if you just have a smaller company that isn't digging into all the things necessary, they're not going to cover as much and not give you as many protections. And we're not suggesting that. Obviously, everybody has the exposure at some point. There's a weak point somewhere, and that's what we're trying to do, right? We're all trying to offset and get everybody in the best posture they can be. It's not going to stop the best hacker or criminal or attack, but it's going to prevent a lot of them, and that's all we're trying to do, is reduce the numbers. So yeah, definitely. It's another big difference between having an organization working with you versus an individual, whether in or out. That's the other big benefit.
Well, that brings us to this episode's tech tip.
Well, if it isn't a tech tip.
Mistakes to avoid when selecting an MSP. The mistakes are as follows: failing to define your needs, overlooking experience and expertise, not assessing security measures, neglecting scalability and future growth, overlooking support and communication, and most importantly of all, not choosing full scope IT.
That would be your biggest mistake.
Agree.
All right. Well, if you're interested in learning more about this topic, check out our blog post called Choosing the Right Managed IT Services Provider. There will be a link in this week's episode description, and we will also have a link posted on our website, fullscopeit.com/resources. All right. So for this episode's story of the week, we got an in-house story brought to us by our writer, director, producer, all of the above, Michaela.
This is the story of the week.
Listen up!
What do you got for us this week?
Yeah, so I have a story. One of the things that I do, we have a editor for this podcast, but I've done some of the episodes as well. So something I've been doing on the side is just video editing. I really enjoy it. It's like a hobby for me. I get lost in video editing. So I made a profile on Upwork just to try to see if I could pick up some side gigs in addition to my regular job. And Upwork is basically like a Fiverr, like the sites where freelancers will make their profiles and they'll put examples of things that they've edited, and then clients will post like jobs that they need editing. You can do it for other things besides video editing, but this is like the category I'm working in. And so I had applied to a couple different like small things, and I saw one that had a pretty high hourly rate for, in my opinion, for video editing, because a lot of people will go on and look for like $5 to $15 video editors in other countries because they know they can get quick, fast, but their editing techniques and the quality is different compared to for some. So I have like a mid-range, hourly rate, trying to make some money. And this hourly rate that was given for this one project was $80 to $100. And everything that they needed was stuff that I knew I could deliver pretty quickly. So I was like, this is like pretty cool. Like I definitely qualified for the job. So I applied to it. And that night I got a message from, you can't see who the client is until they accept your proposal. So I got a message from this guy, Jeffrey Johnson, and he messaged me and said, I would like you to speak with our recruiter. I emailed the recruiter. He gave me the email address. And that's probably where I first went wrong, because he was taking me outside of the platform. Whereas the other people I'd been discussing, we connected in the platform. But this was only my second time communicating with someone, and I was so new that I didn't even really think like, it's just an email. So he said that he's a part of Kelly Services. So I looked, Kelly Services is a real company. So I'm emailing with the recruiter, and he goes, you've passed whatever. After some communication, he was like, you made it to the next level. Like, we love your work. Please fill out this 60-minute questionnaire. And so I'm like, okay. And this thing was intense. And looking back, I'm like, they totally got this off of ChatGPT, because the questions are so like it was like, tell me about your design process. Why are you passionate for video? What's your experience with this program? That to me was like, they must be really legit if you're asking for like, this in-depth question.
I was thinking, why would you take that long for some,
not
I
just
don't
for
want to
anything.
ruin where you're getting to. Yeah.
Yeah. And in my mind, I'm like, this is a high price hourly rate when you can edit fast. So like, this is worth it. So I sent in the questionnaire, and then the guy emailed me back within like an hour, and he's like, hey, you'll be hearing from me soon. And then I didn't hear from him all day. And so I was like, okay. And then I heard from him that night, and he sent me a contract, and he was like, congratulations. We're like really excited to have you part of the team. And like at this point, I'm like looking for spelling errors. And the only thing I find is that this guy I'm communicating with is Matt Odell or something. And in the contract, it says your point of contact will be Matt Odell. And then at the end of the contract, it says sincerely Matt Odell. So I'm like, why would he like talk in third person in the contract? That's kind of weird. And then so they sent over the contract, and they said, please send over your name, address, and phone number. And like whenever I saw that, for some reason, I got like a pit in my stomach. I'm like, okay, this is weird. Like they just hired me without even talking to me on the phone or anything. Like this is very weird. So I look at the domain and I'm like, I'm so thankful for all the years I've worked at Full Scope, because I wouldn't know to like do this if I hadn't been a part of these podcasts and like learned and whatever. So I noticed their domain was Kelly Services Recruiting. So I'm like trying my best to find out if this is a real domain. And they had these two people who said they worked at Kelly Services had what in the world? Do you see these
You have
eyes?
reactions turned on.
Oh, that's so weird.
Funny.
The two people, they have LinkedIn accounts, so they are real, but one was like a customer representative and the other one didn't have that many LinkedIn connects. Another reason to
Another
make sure your
flag.
LinkedIn is on point,
Yep.
because you want your LinkedIn profile to like look legit for this. So
Mhm.
this is Friday night and I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to respond back. Like I can only do so much trying to figure out if this domain is real. I almost messaged Dan and I'm like, it's like Saturday in Israel at this point. I'm not going to bother him. So I call Monday morning to Kelly Services customer support, and I'm like, hey, I like told them everything, and I was like, I've been emailing with Matt Odell with Kelly Services Recruiting. Is this a email domain you guys do? And the guy's like, I just got off the phone with another person. This is a scam.
Oof.
Please avoid them. And you know what's
Wow,
crazy
good
is you
on
can
you.
see how many people this person had connected with, like 20 people, and had
Wow.
contracts with them. So that's my long-winded story. I just thought it was crazy because we talk about like all these different phishing and social engineering, but when you are on a platform that's like for jobs, you don't really think that they'll get by. Like their payment had been verified. You have to verify you're a real client. So I don't know how they got around it onto this site, but I just thought that was crazy.
It's
It
it's
is.
the same story.
Yep.
Here it is again, right?
Yep.
It was something that meant something to you. You probably knew that the pay structure seemed a little too good to be true. That was probably your first flag, even if it didn't
Yeah.
actually hit you right away until you started to see the second, the third,
Yeah.
right? But congratulations, good job.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
Very
just
good job.
proof that education, right? So you
Mhm.
just
Yeah.
proved that because of your experience, you started to put the pieces together.
Yeah.
And the
So I love
importance of
hearing that part.
cybersecurity training, which is part of phishing
Yep.
campaigns. We sent fake
Mm.
phishing campaigns out. 74% of
Yeah.
the
Yep.
attacks in 2022, they said, was the human element. And that all flows back to
Wow.
the phishing campaigns and that the importance of those. So, yeah,
That's
congratulations.
crazy. It passed.
You passed. I'm surprised we haven't talked about it, but I imagine that employment sites as a whole, recruiting is probably a big area of actors, of threat actors, right? Because you're getting everybody's personal information, if nothing else. Think about
Yeah.
an application, all the stuff we put on an application.
I know. That's what I was thinking. I'm like, imagine if they sent over a thing and had me fill out like my payment information because we weren't going through the other website. So now I like want to look into, you can Google specific articles and see how common this is to see if I can find anything, because I've thought about it in all different scenarios thanks to like the discussions on the podcast and just even working with Full Scope, but I didn't really think about the employment element.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, they could have asked for a copy of your driver's license.
Hmm.
And you'd have been like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
this would make sense. I'm being employed as a contractor, sure.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
And that's a long end game. That's the other thing is like, I feel like usually scams seem to be kind of quicker. I mean, lately it seems like they're going through
that
various
seems
calls and
pretty quick.
emails,
I mean,
but
we know of scams that
yeah,
are months long,
yeah,
right?
that's
In
true.
spear phishing, where they get into the organization and start to learn, and so they can emulate someone else's language. So this is
Mm-hmm.
actually not that long. I mean, you're talking about a
Yeah.
couple of days.
Yeah, that's true.
That's
Yeah.
not bad.
Remember how we've talked about before how, and Dan's mentioned this a couple of times, you used to be able to tell scams by like if there was like errors in the writing or like,
Oh,
Yeah.
grammar. But with this, it was like literally it was just that one thing. It sounded so legit.
mhm.
They were going to pay you like, I'm going
Better.
to, okay, it's $500, but I'm going to pay you 1,000 I just need you to send me back the
Yeah.
different. Good job, Michaela.
Listen to Full Scope Cybercast and you will save yourself from scams in the future. We have
There you
proof
go.
right here in house.
Yeah, that's true.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of the Full Scope Cybercast, Safeguarding the Digital Frontier. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode, so until then, stay behind your firewall.